Our partners at Stat News reporting first today about a World Health Organization website showing Gilead's Remdesivir showed no benefit for coronavirus patients in China. For more, let's bring in CNBC's pharma reporter, Tirrell, and Matthew Herper. He is the senior writer for Stat News. Matthew, I'm coming to you first. Tell us more about what happened today, what you saw.
Well, this is an unusual situation. One of my colleagues saw a clinical trial abstract posted on the World Health Organization website that revealed the results of this study. This is the first time we've seen data from a randomized controlled study, which is the medical gold standard for remdesivir. And the study was clearly negative and actually looks like it went the wrong way. Looks like that there was certainly no mortality benefit, and there may have even been a detriment. Now, Gilead, the maker of remdesivir, cautions that they say you shouldn't read too much into this, that there were trends we're not seeing in the data that may have been positive, but it's certainly not encouraging news.
Meg, this was one study, and let's be clear, there are several others going on, and they're going on in the United States. They seem to be trusted by more people. What can you tell us?
Well, we're expecting within the next week to see the first readout of a full trial from Gilead. That's going to be in the most severe patients. Now, we have to take those data with a grain of salt as well, because they are not the gold standard controlled clinical trials that we'll be looking for and that we'll get to see in late May from the NIH. So this first one from Gilead will give us some more information. We're then going to see a second one from Gilead in May as well in less severe patients, in moderate patients. And then we'll see that NIH trial, which really will be the gold standard at the end of May. So really, we're going to be waiting for another month probably until we get a really good idea of whether remdesivir really works.
Matthew, critical to note here as well, this study apparently in China was stopped early because it had too few patients. What do we make of that?
So some people have expressed skepticism because of that, but it does appear that, look at what happened to COVID-19 in China. There's been a dramatic decrease in the number of cases, and that makes it a lot harder to enroll a clinical trial. That's probably why the study was stopped early, but it also means that it has less statistical power than the researchers who designed the study expected at the beginning, and that could make the results less clear.
And Meg, remind us, when should we expect these results from Gilead from these studies here in the U.S. and in how many days?
Well, so May is next Friday, and Gilead has said by the end of the month we're going to see the first trial results. So we're expecting it within the week, Scott.
Look forward to it. Meg, thanks so much. Matthew Herper, our thanks to you as well. We bring back in now Dr. Gottlieb. So, Dr. Gottlieb, what do we think about this study today, or at least what is trickling out from China?
Well, I don't think it tells us that much. We believe that the drug, if it is effective, it's probably weakly active. This isn't going to be a home run drug. I think it could be beneficial in an overall therapeutic approach to the disease heading into the fall. But we never thought that this antiviral was going to have a really robust treatment effect. And we also thought that it was going to work best if introduced early in the course of the disease. So this was an underpowered study that was stopped early because they were unable to continue enrolling the study. And it was in severe patients, the patients that are less likely to have a robust treatment effect. It's unfortunate the way the Chinese handled this study. I'll just say that because Gilead went through great lengths to get the drug to China to help them stand up this study. And the Chinese investigators here don't seem to have been forthcoming with that data or provided it in a way that it was constructive for us in terms of our decision-making and just learning about this drug. So it's unfortunate the way this unfolded, but I'm not sure we can draw too much from this one study. The data that's going to get read out, hopefully really soon, is going to be in less severe patients. And so that's going to give us a better indication if the drug can be effective when introduced earlier in the course of the disease.
You still fairly optimistic about remdesivir?
I've felt all along, looking at the data that's accrued so far, that it looks like it's active. It's probably weakly active, but it probably has activity and could potentially provide a therapeutic benefit if used in the right conditions in the right setting. I still think that's probably going to be the case, but we have to wait and see. The studies are going to get read out. This is why we do clinical studies, because a hunch isn't good for decision-making if you're making decisions for a lot of patients. So we have to wait and see what these studies say. But there's enough studies underway between the 2 open label studies that are underway and the randomized trial that's being conducted by the NIH, that we should get a pretty good read on whether this drug is working and just how robust that treatment effect is.
Let's move to talk about a couple of other items before we go. New York's governor today said results from serology testing that the state's infection rate was 13.7%, but actually 21% in New York City. You think those are too high, as some others do?
Well, this is also consistent with what we've been saying. We've said on this show that we're diagnosing 1 in 10 to 1 in 20 cases probably in this country. So this would suggest that they're diagnosing 1 in 12 cases in New York. And it would imply that there's 1.7 million New Yorkers that have been infected. We've said on the show anywhere from 1 to 2 million New Yorkers probably will have this virus by the time the epidemic runs its course. That would put the infection fatality rate right at about 1%, because you have 17,000 New Yorkers who've perished tragically from this infection, from this virus. And this prevalence study suggests that there's 1.7 million New Yorkers that have had the infection. So it would put the numbers consistent with the kinds of targets that we've expected. Now, that said, I think it's a little high. We have to understand better what this antibody test was and the specificity and reliability of the test, because while I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the epidemic, 2 million New Yorkers have been infected, I'd be surprised if this early in the course of the epidemic you're getting up into those kinds of numbers. And so I suspect it's a little high, but it's probably not that high. It's probably not out of the bounds of where this is going to end up.
You tweeted today as well, by the time New York City confirmed its first case of COVID-19 on March 1st, as many as 10,000 infections were already silently spreading through the city. That's according to one analysis. What do we make of that?
Well, again, consistent with what we've been learning, which is that this virus was spreading pretty widely in the United States and we weren't detecting it. And that gets back to the question of why didn't we have diagnostic testing and surveillance testing in place much earlier? Had we had that testing in place earlier, and had we been randomly testing or routinely testing people who are presenting with flu-like symptoms but testing negative for the flu, we probably would have detected these outbreaks sooner and probably would have been in a position to take action sooner that might have mitigated the scope of this epidemic. We didn't have that capability in place, and so 10,000 infections might have been able to accrue in New York before we were able to detect the scope of this epidemic.
Talk so often about New York because it has been the nation's hotspot. But can you speak to the people of California tonight? It is the world's 4th largest economy. How is that state doing?
Better than New York. They took mitigation steps earlier and were able to contain their epidemic. And so you've seen them peak much sooner, and they've been coming down their epidemic curve. And they never really had the burden on their healthcare system that was once anticipated. So the state made good decisions, probably had less infection overall than New York, but they made good decisions that was able to contain their epidemic at an earlier stage, particularly in San Francisco.
Let's end on a positive note, if we could. Oxford University researchers began testing their potential vaccine on humans. They say it could be ready by the end of the summer or September. What do we know?
Well, look, there's a number of vaccines in development globally. Here in the United States, there's probably 4 different platforms that are being tried in terms of trying to get to a vaccine for coronavirus. I'm pretty confident that we're going to have a vaccine that we're able to produce at scale and put into later stage or larger scale human trials in the fall. And if we do have a vaccine where we have millions of doses available, if we had an outbreak in a major American city, you'd probably test the vaccine in the context of that outbreak, where you might randomize people within a city to receive the vaccine. So you'd use the vaccine to hopefully produce a therapeutic effect in terms of trying to contain an outbreak while you're continuing to study it in the context of a rigorous protocol to determine whether it's safe and effective. So if you think about the best way to deploy a vaccine, it's in the context of an epidemic. And I think we're going to have enough doses of promising vaccines that have cleared preliminary safety trials and demonstrated preliminary safety to put them into testing in the setting of an outbreak if we have outbreaks in American cities this fall, which I think it's inevitable that we'll have some outbreaks going into the fall and the winter.